Welcome to English 3330, Comparative Analysis of English and Spanish. This is Professor James Rivera, and during this unit, we will be considering the concept of vowel values. Speaking versus writing. People speaking in the same language in different places tend to pronounce the same words differently, thus marking what is called linguistic accent. Tomato, tomato. Even within the same country, people's pronunciations may vary. Moreover, one intended sound or phoneme may have different variations within one, which won't necessarily alter the intended meaning of our discourse. For example, when we have a cold, a stuffy nose may alter our speech, yet another speaker of our same language may understand us despite the variation. The same thing happens naturally when we produce the same phoneme but in different phonetic environments. And this is what we have projected onto the screen here, right? We have the different allophonic variation of a particular phoneme. In this case, the phoneme A. We have two allophones of the same phoneme, the nasal and the non-nasal variations of this allophone. We say that they occur in complementary distribution, meaning when one occurs, the other one doesn't. However, substituting one for the other, despite how awkward this may result, doesn't change the meaning of what it is that we're saying. So this is barely perceptible. Now, what may be different is when we change a phoneme for another. I should say what is different. When we consider the complexities of the English phonetic system, we notice that it will have a direct influence on its writing system. So we have many sounds and we have less letters, specifically 38 sounds versus 26 letters. So the grapheme-phoneme correspondence is not equal, meaning the amounts of visual representations of sounds that we have are scarce. Therefore, we have to make do with what we have, and in some instances we will have to have combinations of graphemes to represent different sounds, or one same grapheme will correspond to a variety of phonemes. This is very different from Spanish, where we tend to have a one-to-one grapheme to phoneme correspondence. Moving right along. So in English, we must represent 38 speech sounds with only 26 letters. Since the goal of our course is to expose you to fundamental elements of the phonological comparison between English and Spanish, with emphasis, of course, on English, we will concentrate here on some observations related to the English vowels. So, what are vowel values is the first question that comes to our minds, right? One of the things that I tend to enforce or encourage you to do is find definitions for the concepts that you're going to be working with as educators. This meta-language is always very important, as I tend to underscore when we can name the concepts, the ideas, the notions, the fields in which we're immersed. This gives us a sense of empowerment. So it's not simply for us to use the concept value as a linguistic concept in the discussion of sounds and how it is that this influences our writing system or orthography. I think that we can better understand it if we're able to define what this concept is. And of course, as I've already said, right, in introducing the topic, this is an introductory exposition of the topic because your intention is not yet to be linguists, despite the fact that I hope that some of you will be encouraged or you'll feel moved to further study linguistics. But our main goal is to have a working knowledge regarding these concepts for the field of education. So what do we mean by value? Remember, we're going to focus on graphic representations of the language. Bear in mind that there are 14 vowel phonemes in English and only 5 letters to represent these sounds. This is what we were referring to as grapheme to phoneme correspondence. So the values are the particular representations attributed to the graphemes. Again, and maybe in lay terms, we have less letters than we have sounds. We talked about 38 versus 26 when we're talking about the entire phonetic system in English. We're not going to be dealing with all of the phonemes, so we're going to narrow it down and focus on just the vowels. So we have 14 phonemes, vowel phonemes in English, but we have only 5 letters to represent these. Therefore, we have to attribute different values to those letters in order for them to be able to represent orthographically that which we want to elicit within our writing. Hopefully this is a little clearer. So when we're talking about values, it's similar to the number values in a number line. You have a numeric line or a number line that runs from negative to positive. So -2, +2. Each of these numbers means something to us. The same thing happens with letters, of course, in not such a clear manner, but hopefully once we are immersed in considering and evaluating and analyzing the specific scenarios in which each of these graphemes will occur, then we'll have a clearer notion. Despite the fact that it's still a complex issue, hopefully we'll be able to better understand once we start to see these particular patterns. Right? So we're going to be talking about 2 specific values, and we're going to focus on basic values, which are simple and complex. So when I'm not going to go into other values beyond the basic. And so we're still narrowing down, and the idea here again is for us to be able to have a notion, an idea, a clearer understanding of how it is that these how it is that the graphemes in English are organized. So in Spanish, it's simpler, right? In Spanish, you have, as I said before, a one-to-one correspondence in terms of grapheme to phoneme or vice versa. We can probably better internalize what it is that we mean by simple value and complex value in English when we consider the system in Spanish. In Spanish, the simple vowel values are spelled with one vowel. Casa. So you have one letter that refers to it, and the same thing when we're referring to its phonetic symbol. However, when we want to represent a complex value in Spanish, you have combinations of letters that are used for such representation. So let's go straight into the first of these values that we're going to be considering. Basic simple vowel values. We're going to be focusing on 4 environments, and these environments, as I've mentioned before, are related to where and in relation to what other letters the grapheme that we're using to represent a particular vowel sound is going to occur. So these patterns are going to help us to better understand the values of these vowels, and of course, with the intention of being able to internalize what it is that we're going to be teaching prospectively. Here, you can see the two values that we're going to be focusing on, right? So though there are other values of vowels, for introductory purpose, we will focus only on the basic, simple, and complex values. What determines a vowel's value is where in the word and in relation to what other phonemes it occurs. Notice this chart. Here we have the two values that I said before that we're going to be focusing on. The simple value, notice a, e, I, a. Later on, I'm going to be underscoring some more details, but I'll probably tell you right now, right? If you make a simple phonetic observation of what we have, you will notice that these simple value vowels correspond to lax vowels. Notice on the top, we have the letter representation or the orthographic representation, the grapheme, A, E, I, O, U, and what you have as simple value isn't necessarily how it is that we call the letter in English. How we call the letter in English is by its basic complex value. Notice the phonemes that represent each of these graphemes in their basic complex value. A, E, I, O, U. And also as a note, some of the vowel or the phonetic symbols that you're going to be seeing in the presentation don't necessarily correspond to the same symbols that you will find in other places, in other texts, I should say. In some texts, you will find that particularly the diphthongs, the second sound represented within the diphthong is sometimes represented by the symbol that you would use for the letter J or the capital letter I. So here, you're going to base your understanding or internalization of what that sound is based on what it is that I'm going to pronounce. But this is something that we've talked about before. If you've taken a course in phonetics, this is something that you can understand. If you go to a text such as Fromkin and Rodman, Introduction to Language, you'll see some representations there. If you go to the Teacher's Manual by Celsi Mersha, you will see if you consider Introduction to the Fundamentals of Phonetics by Small, you will see another type of symbol. And sometimes you will also, another book in Structure of Grammar by Kaplan, you will find other symbols. And sometimes they'll coincide and others they won't. Where it is that they sometimes will find some difference, or we will find some difference, is mainly in these diphthongs. So just for your sake, right, for our sake, in understanding what it is that we're discussing, the basic simple value corresponds to a, e, I, a. Here you have the schwa. However, this sound may occur in a stressed syllable, and we know that for the sake of phonetic transcription, we can also use the wedge, which is more appropriate, right? The wedge represents this particular sound, lax sound that occurs in a stressed syllable. Therefore, if you have a word that is monosyllabic and it has this sound, you would not transcribe it with the schwa, you would transcribe it with the wedge. And in the remaining slides, that is exactly what I'm pointing out. The basic complex value of vowels corresponds to the sounds A, E, I, O, U. You will notice that these sounds are either tense or diphthongal or diphthongic, right? So the diphthongs. Some of them in different texts in phonetics will be represented by a diphthong transcription. As a matter of fact, in the handout that I provided, this is exactly what you see. Right? You have a transcription that is similar to that of a diphthong. However, we've mentioned before that there are many linguists, or phoneticians, I should say, that do not consider these necessarily to be diphthongs. And the diphthongs in English are three, I, ow, oi. However, a, e, o, u may be seen in some texts as being so. So moving right along, in this slide that we have here, we're considering the first environment. The 5 vowel letters will have different vowels corresponding to various vowel phonemes. By way of clarification, the phonetic symbols won't always be consistent across articles related to the same topic in phonology. With regard to the symbols used for basic simple value, you will notice I've added the wedge, which the provided article doesn't use. I do so since this vowel phoneme occurs in stressed syllables. Now in this slide, notice the basic simple vowel value. It corresponds to the phonemes a, e, a, and Here I'm using both schwa and wedge for reasons already explained. Our focus will be the 4 environments in written English in which these vowel sounds will occur. So environment number 1 corresponds to words in which the vowel appears immediately before a final consonant. The final consonant can be represented by a digraph or a trigraph. And we talked about what these are, right? Digraphs and trigraphs, and there may be an overlap between this and a following environment. But to explain, in case you have forgotten or you need a refresher, digraphs are graphic representations of one sound using 2 symbols, 2 letters in this case. So CH corresponds to the sound ch, right? An affricate sound. Whereas sh, this fricative sound, is represented by SH. And the PH, sometimes in English we know, corresponds to the sound f. And this occurs sometimes in initial, medial, or final position. The same thing happens with trigraphs such as TCH that represent the sound ch. So these account for 1 letter. Examples of the basic simple vowel values in this first environment: with a, you have words such as trash, cap, math, fan, cap. So again, you have the vowel letter, which represents the simple value a, which is a lax sound, will occur at the end of the word, preceding a final consonant, which can be 1 letter, a digraph, or a trigraph. Environment number 2. This corresponds to words in which the vowel appears immediately before a double consonant, either in medial or final position. So notice that we're not talking about a cluster, we're talking about a double consonant. And this double consonant will mostly occur when you have a final suffix, or you have a suffix which begins with a vowel. So the word pass, it's inflected for either the plural or the third person singular. You have the same sound, and here you have a double consonant. So the double consonant is either going to be part of the original word, or it's going to occur as a result of adding a suffix which begins with a vowel. This does not occur with the letters H, J, K, and all the ones that I've mentioned at the bottom of this slide, right? And of course, digraphs are not doubled. Environment number 3. This corresponds to words in which the vowel appears immediately before a consonant cluster in medial or final position. So a consonant cluster is when you have 2 or more adjacent consonants. a double consonant is not considered a consonant cluster. Right? These two, this doubled consonant corresponds to an effect of including a suffix, and to avoid an alteration in pronunciation, visually, this is the result. Now, consonant cluster is when you have two or more consonants that occur adjacent to each other. In this case, you have the vowel. It's going to occur either in the middle or at the end of the word preceding a cluster. Examples: weld, crisp, fond, fund. Right? Notice the lax vowel. Environment number 4 corresponds to words in which the vowel appears immediately before a consonant cluster followed by a silent E. Notice the symbol for silent E, which is an E, a lowercase e with a slash through it. That represents the final or the silent E. In the case of dance, wedge, bridge, notice the cluster and the silent E, which occurs at the end. And the note that I'm presenting here, as in the handout, it's an orthographic marker for the preceding consonant, but does not affect the value of the vowel letter itself. So here, if I didn't have that silent E in the word dance, it would seem that I'm saying dank, even though that's not a word, right? Bag, bag. So that silent E provides for that, for the marking of that final letter, which represents something different to what we're accustomed to in writing and, of course, in speech. So up to here, we have the 4 environments of the basic simple vowel values. Notice that the only environment where we're talking about the silent E is going to be in this 4th environment. You will notice that in the basic complex vowel values, we have the silent E in each one. So this leads us to the next topic, which is, of course, basic complex vowel values. So the simple value corresponds to vowels that are lax. In the complex values, there are no lax vowel phonemes. Now, I want to make a clarification that even though I've underscored this in the explanation of the previous slides or in the introduction to the topic that we're considering, this doesn't mean that the concepts simple and lax are synonymous. That's just an observation so that you remember that those values that are simple correspond to lax vowel phonemes. Those that are complex will not have any lax vowel phonemes. It's important that we remember these. So we're only considering 10 vowel phonemes, despite the fact that we have 14 vowel phonemes in English. But this for the sake of being able to understand the concept of values of vowels. So moving right along, we're considering now basic complex vowel values. We have 3 environments. The first one, first notice that the phonemes that make up the complex values are tense or a diphthong. These correspond to the sounds A, E, I, O, U, which is usually how we refer to the letters that represent vowels in the English alphabet. So the first environment corresponds to a word in which the vowel appears immediately before a consonant followed by a silent E. Ace, ease, prize, oh. So notice each of these vowel phonemes occurs immediately before a single consonant, and that single consonant is going to be followed by a silent E. Environment number 2 corresponds to a word in which the vowel appears before a single consonant followed by a suffix that begins with a vowel that replaces the E. So game, tease, prime, close, brute. You could say that each of those corresponds to the first environment, However, if you add a suffix where the suffix replaces that silent E, then you have the second environment. From game to gamer. Notice the sound of that vowel does not change. Tease to teaser. Prime, primer. Close, closing. Brute, brutal. So in each of these cases, the suffix beginning with a consonant is added. Then the silent E is replaced. In some cases, the silent E isn't replaced, and the environment is the same as environment number 1. All right, so moving right along, the third and final environment that we're going to be considering here is one in which the vowel letter occurs adjacent to a silent E. This is not the most common, however, it does occur. Least common when you have the vowel phoneme A, as in the word Sunday. Notice the letter A is representative of that sound. It's accompanied by a silent E. It's more common in the other vowel phonemes that we have here. E, A, O, U. So we've talked about the two basic vowel values, these being simple and complex. Maybe something that you should be able to remember is that the simple vowel values correspond to 5 vowel phonemes that are lax. Important that you remember what they are, corresponding to each of the graphemes or letters, right? So letter A, letter E, letter I, etc., etc. What is the simple vowel value that corresponds to the letter A? That is A, right? So, or the ligature that you've learned is the name for that phonetic symbol that we use to refer to the sound A, as in cab. I want you to remember the 4 environments, and the same thing with the basic complex vowel values. Easier for you to remember the corresponding phonetic symbols that we use in relation to these vowel values, because they're basically the sounds that or the names that we give to the letters, to their corresponding letters in the alphabet in English, with the exception, of course, of U. We don't say the vowel phoneme being U, but U. Okay, so up to here, this first part of vowel values, hopefully this will help you to better internalize the material that we've considered up to this part of the unit. Any questions or any doubts, feel free to contact me via email. Have a good one.